Hi, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. You found a quiet little corner of the world, just for a little while. A place where we can drift together, not just into sleep, but into the long forgotten shadows of history. Tonight, I want to begin a story. A long one, a slow one that stretches like the moss over old stones, like twilight falling over a crooked chapel on the edge of the forest. It's a story about what it meant to leave yourself behind, to feel different, feel lighter, or stranger in the distant world of the Middle Ages. But this isn't just about getting high as we know it now. No, back then, there were no pills in little plastic bottles, no glass pipes, no neon signs outside of dispensaries. There were only herbs in a basket, firelight in the eyes, the hush of incense, and the trembling line between sickness and vision. In this series, we'll wander through monasteries where monks saw angels and alleys where desperate lovers bought potions under moonlight. We'll meet witches, saints, fools, and wanderers, and every story will float by like a dream, sometimes soft, sometimes strange, sometimes sweetly sad. So lay back, let your breathing slow, and let me tell you how it began. A world so heavy, people longed to float away. Life in the medieval world was heavy, so very heavy. The days were long, the nights were cold, and most people bore the same aching burdens day after day. Their backs bent under labor, their hearts strained under grief, war, plague, hunger. And when the world is that hard, sometimes you just want to escape. But escape didn't mean the same thing then. It wasn't always about pleasure. Sometimes it meant sleep. Sometimes it meant seeing a dead loved one in a dream. Sometimes it meant hearing the voice of God or the devil. And so they turned to plants and rituals and holy trances. They whispered over boiling pots. They brewed strange ales in monastery kitchens. They danced all night to drums and fiddles, sweating and sobbing until their minds broke loose from their bodies. The line between healing and hallucinating was never clear. But for many, that was the point. Let me take you to a little garden. No, not the kind with roses and tulips. This is a darker garden. Behind an apothecary's shop, beneath a crumbling stone wall, there grow the plants that changed minds. There's henbane, with its soft yellow flowers and poisonous seeds. There's mandrake, whose roots grow like tiny shrieking humans. And belladonna, the beautiful lady, with berries as glossy as obsidian. These plants could ease pain or plunge you into madness. They were used in ointments that made people feel like they were flying. They were part of witches' brews and love potions, given to desperate women by wandering herbalists with eyes like smoke. And the smoke, oh, the smoke. It filled churches with sacred frankincense. It wafted from campfires and cauldrons. It drifted over sleeping bodies like forgotten prayers. Not everyone understood. Some people thought these altered states were holy. Others thought they were demonic. If a monk wept during prayer and saw the Virgin Mary, he was praised as a saint. If a poor woman drank a potion and saw a vision, she might be tied to a stake. And yet they kept reaching for that other world. Because sometimes the veil between here and there, between waking and dreaming, was just too thin to ignore. It wasn't just about getting high. It was about getting away. And maybe about getting closer to something bigger, to something beautiful, or terrifying, or both. A long sleep, a long story. Over the next 19 parts, we'll walk slowly through these hidden paths of history. We'll visit a convent where a nun heard voices from the walls. We'll sit beside a jester whose madness might have been more wisdom than the king knew. We'll open an imaginary book written in the 13th century, one filled with recipes for sleep and dreams and forgetting. Each part will be like its own chamber in a forgotten castle. And in each one, we'll pause, we'll listen, we'll rest. Because this isn't a story to rush, it's a story to sink into, like a warm bath after a storm, like thick wool blankets by firelight, like the gentle hush of midnight. The rules of the garden. Now, a few quiet promises. Every episode will be soft and steady and never jarring. We'll never rush to conclusions. I'll never shout, and you never have to stay awake. If sleep takes you, let it. The story will still be here. These tales were always meant to be heard with half-closed eyes. The first door opens soon. In the next chapter, we'll visit a woman whose knowledge of plants made her both respected and feared. She lives in a cottage at the edge of a deep forest, and tonight she is preparing a mixture of herbs that might heal or might send someone into a very long dream. They call her a wise woman, but some call her something else, something darker. We'll meet her soon. But for now, I'll let the silence return. May your pillow be soft, your dreams be sweet, and your heart stay curious. Good night, for now. The forest is still tonight. Beneath the canopy of sleeping trees, the wind moves gently, stirring the ferns. A thin line of smoke rises above the treetops, gray and ghost-like. If you follow it step by step, you'll come to a little cottage nestled deep in the woods, where moss grows thick and the air smells of drying leaves and damp stone. This is her home. She's not a noblewoman. She has no coat of arms, no books with her name in them. But in every village within a 2-day ride, they know of her. They call her the herbalist. Some whisper that she's a healer. Others call her a witch. A basket full of secrets. On her table tonight, there's a basket. It's lined with faded cloth and filled with herbs you wouldn't find in a lord's kitchen garden. She picks them in the early morning, just after dew, but before sun. She says the plants are sleepier then, less likely to resist. Here's what she has today. Henbane, small yellow flowers with black centers like tiny eyes, watching. Deadly nightshade with berries that shine like polished marbles. Valerian root, dried and crumbling, but still pungent and strong. And a few leaves of poppy, carefully dried under her eaves. She touches them like old friends. Some will soothe pain, some will blur the senses, and some, well, some are not meant for the living to take it all. But people ask her for them anyway. Visitors come quietly. The villagers don't come in the daylight. That's too dangerous. They come at twilight, wrapped in cloaks, hoods low. A mother whose child hasn't slept in days. A farmer who hears voices at night. A girl who wants someone to love her and fears he never will. They offer coins sometimes. More often, bread, or eggs, or a favor to be named later. And the herbalist always knows just what to give. A salve, a tea, a little bottle with a wax-sealed cork. The tonic of forgetting. Tonight she's brewing something special. A traveling soldier has come. He saw things, horrible things, things he can't name, things that crawl into his dreams like snakes. He hasn't slept in 3 days. His hands shake, even as he clutches his mug. She doesn't speak much, she listens. And then she goes to her shelves. She grinds poppy seed, dried and sharp, adds valerian and a pinch of wormwood. She stirs it into warm wine and murmurs something. Not quite a prayer, not quite a spell. She gives it to him and waits. What comes after? He falls asleep within the hour. His breathing evens, his hands go still. And as the moon rises, the herbalist watches him from across the room, her fingers gently rubbing a sprig of lavender between them. She has seen this hundreds of times, but still, she worries. Because sometimes, the dreams that come from her potions are worse than the ones her guests had before. Sometimes, they don't wake up. A dangerous knowledge. Where did she learn all this? No one knows. Some say she was once a noble's wet nurse, cast out for a crime she didn't commit. Others claim her mother was burned for sorcery and she escaped into the woods. There's even a story that she lived in a convent once, where she copied herbals by candlelight and heard God whisper from the pages. The truth, maybe, is that she learned the way all women like her did, by watching, by failing, by listening to what the plant said, and by keeping her mouth shut. The thin edge of survival. In medieval times, healers like her were both vital and feared. The church didn't like people who worked outside its blessing, but villages needed her more than they needed permission. She could cure fevers, ease childbirth, and sometimes help people forget grief. But if a child died, or if a potion caused madness, fingers would point. Many women like her ended up in prison, tortured, burned, not because they were evil, but because they knew too much. Her private ritual. When everyone's gone and the fire's low, the herbalist prepares her own brew, just a tiny one. She adds only 3 herbs, mild ones, things to soften the edge of the world. She drinks it slowly, wrapped in her shawl. She lies down listening to the crickets and the rustling of the trees, and sometimes she dreams of her childhood, a soft voice singing, a warm hand brushing her hair, a time when she was just a girl with muddy shoes and scraped knees. She wakes with tears on her cheeks. The herbalist's promise. She has a rule, never give a potion you haven't tasted. She knows what it's like to be afraid. She knows what it's like to want to disappear, even for one night. And so she helps them, quietly, carefully, but always with the knowledge that one wrong leaf and everything could change. The power to alter the mind is ancient, but it is never safe. Not for the giver, not for the taker, not even for the watcher. As the stars fade and the sky turns pale blue, someone else knocks at her door. It's a young woman this time. Not afraid, not sick, just curious. She wants to learn, wants to feel what it's like, to see colors that don't exist, to hear the voices the herbalist has never spoken of, to fly without wings. The old woman pauses, and then she invites her in. Next, Al, Mead, and Madness. In our next chapter, we'll step away from the woods and into a raucous village celebration. Tankards of ale clink. Music echoes off the tavern walls. And soon, we'll find out that for many in the Middle Ages, the most common high came from the barrel, not the herb. But even ale could bring visions and sometimes madness. Sleep well, wanderer. The path continues tomorrow, somewhere near the market square, in a village you'll never find on any map. There's a low wooden building with a crooked sign swinging above the door. It creaks in the breeze. The carving shows a goat standing on a barrel. Inside, it smells of wood smoke, warm bread, sweat, and ale. This is where the townsfolk come not to forget, but to loosen their shoulders, their sorrows, their tongues, and sometimes their fears. Tonight is feast day, and the barrels are open. Liquid comfort in a harsh world. In the medieval world, water could not always be trusted. Wells were murky, streams fouled by animals upstream. But ale was safe. It had been boiled, brewed, fermented. It tasted of barley, yeast, and sometimes a hint of smoke from the fire it simmered over. But it wasn't just about thirst. Ale warmed cold bellies, it dulled toothaches. It eased childbirth, soothed the dying, and silenced grief, for a few hours at least. And mead was sweeter, golden, a drink for weddings and holy days. It was called the drink of the gods in old tongues, and after 2 mugs, many believed it. The taverns glow. Let's step inside. Slowly. The door creaks. The fire glows on the hearth. A minstrel plays a slow tune on a fiddle with 1 string too many. A boy chases a chicken between the benches. And in the back, a group of old men sit hunched over a game board, ale sloshing with every laugh. A serving girl with tangled hair and a tired smile brings out a tray of mugs. Foam spills down the sides. No one minds. Stronger than it should be in the modern world, ale is mild, polished, measured, but not here, not now. This ale was brewed 3 days ago by a woman named Marta who doesn't measure by scale, but by instinct. She adds honey from her cousin's hives, a pinch of wild hops, and, when she's feeling bold, a sprig of woodruff to sweeten the dreams. No 2 batches are ever the same. Sometimes they're gentle, sometimes not. Tonight's batch is strong, too strong. The village drunk in the Angel. There's a man by the fire. They call him Old Toma. He's always here. Ale-stained lips, stories too strange to be lies. Tonight, after his 3rd cup, he rises. He lifts his hands like wings. He says he sees a woman in white above the hearth, says she's calling him by name. Some laugh, some cross themselves. The old priest stirs uneasily in the corner. He's seen this before. The line between holy vision and drink madness is thin. The alawife's knowledge. Behind the tavern, in the dark, Marta the brewer works by candlelight. She's not just making ale, she's guiding it. She listens to the yeast. She prays over the barrel. Sometimes when she brews, she adds herbs that aren't in the monastery books, a bit of mugwort to bring strange dreams, a sliver of wild fennel to lift the mind. They don't call it sorcery, but they don't ask questions either. Of song and sudden silence, the music rises. A girl dances, her feet tap the dirt floor, skirts spinning like a bell. Men cheer. One stumbles forward to join her. They both fall laughing into a heap of straw. But then someone screams. A boy near the back has collapsed. His cup still half full, his eyes wide, but seeing nothing. He's not dead. Not yet. Just lost, they say. His mind drifting far beyond the tavern's firelight. They carry him out into the cold. Ale as communion. In some places, monks brewed the finest beer, not for profit, for God. They believed a strong ale could help the sick sleep better, help the grieving find peace, even help the devout enter states of divine clarity. One monk wrote that after 3 mugs of cherry ale, he heard angels singing in the rafters. Another claimed a barrel rolled itself across the room during prayer. Whether truth or not, the stories endure. Beneath the table, underneath one bench, a child hides. She watches her parents laugh louder than they ever do at home. She sees her uncle fall asleep with his mouth open, snoring like a bear. And she wonders if this is what happiness looks like. She won't taste ale for years, but tonight she's learning that sometimes joy comes in cups, and sometimes so does sorrow. Madness or miracle, by midnight the tavern is humming. Some cry, some sing. One man tries to dance with the goat outside. The boundaries are gone, between joy and pain, between reality and dreams. And isn't that what many sought? To blur the edges, to feel, even briefly, that life was bigger than the field or forge or cradle, even if it came with a headache the next day. Dawn breaks cold. The fire is out. The mugs are empty. Someone has written a name in the ashes of the hearth. No one knows whose. The girl sweeps the floor in silence. The brewer begins another batch, and the boy who collapsed, he wakes hours later, in the woods. He says he saw a gate made of stars, and a voice asked him if he was ready. He doesn't remember what he said. Next, monks and the mushroom visions. In our next chapter, we leave the tavern behind and enter the quiet halls of a monastery. There, behind ancient stone and candlelight, a novice monk prepares for a fast. He does not eat, he barely drinks. And one night, in his stillness, something finds him. It wears no crown, speaks no words, and leaves behind only light. Good night, wanderer. Let the ale settle. The story will find you again soon. The monastery lies nestled among gray hills, hidden by fog and time. Its stones are old, older than the kingdom, older than the saints carved into the chapel walls. Moss creeps between the paving stones. The bell tower leans, just slightly. The sound it makes is low and hollow, like it knows the world is sleeping. Inside, it is silent, except for the scratch of a quill, the rustle of a habit, and the quiet breath of prayers whispered in the early dawn. This is a place of rules, of hours, bells, fasting, a place where the soul is polished clean and the body is pushed aside. But even here, visions sometimes come. He is 17, pale as candle wax, with dark eyes that don't blink enough. He rose before dawn, as he always does. He did not eat, he did not speak. He lit the altar candles and swept the floor until his fingers turned red from the chill. Today is the third day of silence, 3 days of fasting, 3 days of prayer, 3 days of emptiness, so that God may enter where flesh has left. Brother Thomas is hungry, and not just for bread. The warnings of the prior. The older monks watch him closely. They say he is too eager, too ready to see miracles, too willing to believe, but they do not stop him. They let him take the fast. Because if God does choose to speak, who are they to block his voice? Still, the prior gives him a small warning. Not all lights are from heaven, Thomas. Some come from inside, and some from below. The boy nods. But he is already drifting far beyond the stone walls. The foraging of Brother Cillian. In the monastery garden, Brother Cillian tends to the herbs, but it is outside the walls, in the woods, where he finds the rare things. Small brown mushrooms that grow in circles, red-capped toadstools he never touches, and one variety, small, gold-flecked, thin as paper, that he dries in secret. He calls them St. Anthony's buttons. Others call them things less kind. He never gives them to the brothers, but sometimes they disappear from his shelf anyway. The night of the vision. It is late. The chapel glows faintly. Thomas is alone. He has not eaten in nearly 4 days. His head swims. His hands tremble as he lights the final candle. And then, without knowing why, he reaches into the sleeve of his robe. There, wrapped in linen, are 3 dried caps of the golden mushrooms. He swallows them without ceremony and waits. For a long time, nothing happens, and then the floor tilts. What he sees, the stones begin to ripple like water disturbed by wind. The candlelight pulses in rhythm with his heartbeat. The walls breathe in and out, and in the silence, a sound, a low hum rising like a chorus made of bees and bells and thunder. A shape appears near the altar, not a person, not a beast, something vast. Winged, but not of feathers, bright, but not of flame. He falls to his knees, he weeps, and in his mind, a voice speaks, but it has no words, only knowing. The others find him. Hours later, the brothers find him still kneeling, eyes open, mouth whispering things in a language they do not understand. He is taken gently to his cot. They bathe his face. They pray over him. When he finally sleeps, he smiles. He does not speak again for 3 days. When he does, he says only, "I saw what comes before light." No one asks what he means. visions in the cloister and watches from the garden wall. He knows what happened. He has felt it too. Long ago, as a novice, he consumed the same mushrooms. He saw a stairway in the sky, made of flame and eyes. He heard his mother's voice calling him, though she had died that winter, but he never told. Because the monastery is not a place for secrets, and it is not always safe to say what you've seen. The church's unspoken rule. In some parts of Christendom, visions were welcomed. Saints levitated. Nuns heard Christ in their sleep. Mystics saw the Virgin rise from stone floors in pools of moonlight. But always, the visions had to serve the church. They had to be pure, documented, believable, controlled. And if they were too strange, if they came with laughter or wildness or fear, then they were declared false, or worse, possessed. The line between holy and hallucinatory. Thomas now walks slower. His eyes see more than they used to. Not just visions, but layers. He sees colors others do not. He hears bells, no one rings. Some brothers begin to avoid him. Others ask him quietly, "Did you really see it?" He never answers, but at night, he goes to the garden, and he watches the mushrooms grow. The Unwritten Chronicle. There is a book in the monastery library. It has no title. Its cover is scarred. Its pages loose. Inside, someone long ago wrote of a vision, a sky that opened, a tree that bled honey, a figure with no face who asked, "Are you ready to forget?" The ink is faded, the handwriting frantic, no name is signed. But Brother Thomas finds the page one day, and he smiles, because he knows now he is not the first. Next, Witch's Flight Ointment. In our next chapter, we follow a different kind of seeker. Not a monk, not a saint, but a woman, barefoot and bold, who rides the edge of dreams with the help of an ancient ointment. They say she can fly. But what does that really mean? Her journey takes place not in a church, but in the air between sleep and memory. Rest now. The visions can wait until morning. The moon is low, and the fields shimmer with frost. Out here, in the far edges of the village, past the hedgerows, beyond the well-worn path, a figure moves through the tall grass. She leaves no trail. Her breath fogs in the cold, but her feet are bare. She carries a small jar, wrapped in linen, sealed with beeswax. Inside is something dark, greenish-black, sticky, smelling of root, leaf, and something else, something strange. She calls it her ointment. Others call it something far more dangerous. The women who knew. Long before the word witch was carved into court records, there were women who knew things. Things about plants, about timing, about cycles, about how the moonlight affects the petals of the foxglove, and how belladonna responds to prayer. They were midwives, healers, lovers of the quiet forest paths, and some of them made the ointment. Not for wealth, not for mischief, but to feel something different. To leave the world behind. The ingredients. The recipe is old, older than the abbeys, older than Latin. In her mortar, belladonna, beautiful lady for blurred vision and floating thoughts. Henbane for heat in the limbs and a gentle sense of falling upward. Wolfsbane, just a touch for vivid sights. Mandrake root, chopped and soaked in fat rendered from goose. She stirs it slowly, murmuring under her breath. Not spells, not quite, just names, memories, promises, to the dark. Where she applies it, she does not eat it. That would be too dangerous. No, she places the ointment where skin is soft and thin, inside the arms, behind the knees, and most often, between her legs. That's what the Inquisitors could never understand. That flight did not require wings. It required surrender. The rising. She lies on a bed of moss under an open sky. At first, there is only silence. Then, a flutter, a rush in the ears. The stars seem to spin. The moon pulses like a heartbeat, and then she's moving, not running, not walking, but rising, over the field, over the trees. Her body still on the ground, but her spirit elsewhere. She sees the village from above, small and tidy. She sees a fire burning where no fire should be. She hears a child crying in the cradle of a dead tree, and then she sees others, women like her, naked, laughing, crying, flying. They meet in the clearing, they dance in the air. They speak without speaking. One of them offers her a cup made of bone. She drinks, it tastes like honey and salt and something lost in childhood. The Sabbath or the dream? When the church learned of these tales, they gave them names. Sabbaths, they said, demonic rites, orgies under the devil's moon. But most of the women never left their homes. Their bodies stayed curled in bed, lips twitching, eyes fluttering. What they experienced was real, but not in the way the priests feared. It was not about sin, it was about freedom. The Inquisitor's notes. In a small cell, a woman is questioned. She is accused of flying to a secret gathering, of consorting with demons, of smearing the ointment and leaving her soul behind. She weeps, not from fear, from longing. I flew, she says, and it was the only time I felt no pain. The scribe writes, she confesses to heresy. But what she said was something else. The morning after, she wakes in her hut, alone, covered in dew. There are scratches on her arms. There is a feather in her hair. There is laughter, still echoing in her chest. She does not speak of it. The ointment has dried in the jar. She tucks it away under the hearthstone. One day, someone else will find it, and they too will wonder what it means to fly. The truth between worlds. Modern scholars argue still. Was it real? Was it poison? Was it mass hysteria? Or chemical hallucination? But for the women who lived it, it wasn't a question. It was a journey. And whether it came from the mind, the body, or something between, it left them changed. That night, she sleeps soundly. No dreams, no visions, only the weightless memory of wind against skin, and the knowledge that even for a little while, she was more than the world allowed her to be. Next, the quiet trance of the anchoress. In the next chapter, we enter stone walls once more, but this time, we do not come out. We'll meet a woman who sealed herself inside a cell beside a church, never to leave again. And through hunger, silence, and prayer, she meets something beyond herself. Not flight this time, but stillness, and what waits inside it. Sleep well, traveler. Let the ointment wear off, and dream gently of skies you once touched. The village forgets she exists. She is just a rumor now, like an old statue behind ivy or a whisper heard during vespers. But years ago, when the bishop came and the villagers stood with candles and prayers, she was someone, a young woman, barely 20, wrapped in white linen and about to disappear, forever. They built her cell against the church wall, no door, just stone and silence. And when the last stone was placed, the ceremony was complete. She had become an anchoress. What it meant to leave the world, to anchor oneself to God, that was the idea. To stay in one place forever, to forsake food, marriage, possessions, even sunlight. Anchoresses were rare, revered, feared too. They gave up the world not out of hatred, but out of longing. Longing for purity, stillness, a perfect silence that might let them hear the divine. But what happens when your only companion is your own mind? It is smell. Stone walls, rough and unpainted. One narrow slit faces the altar. She sees the priest's back during mass, nothing more. Another small window connects to the street. The villagers pass bread through it, sometimes notes. Once a bird's feather. She speaks rarely, only to the priest, only when absolutely necessary. The rest of the time, she prays and waits, what she left behind. Her name was Isolde. She had hair the color of ripe barley and a voice like polished glass. She never sang after entering the cell, but sometimes people thought they heard her humming, softly like wind through a curtain. No one knows why she chose this path. Some say she saw a vision as a child. Others say her betrothed died of plague, and she chose silence over sorrow. But she never said. Hunger and the holy mind. She eats very little. A crust of bread, a little broth, a fig if the season is kind. She fasts often, and during these fasts, her thoughts grow thin, like stretched gold leaf. She begins to feel lifted, light. Sounds grow louder, colors sharper. Her own heartbeat becomes a bell. And then visions begin. The first voice, it comes not from outside, not through the wall, but from inside her, from beneath her ribs. It says, "You are not alone." She opens her eyes, but sees only stone. Still her hands tremble, her breath catches, and she weeps. Not from fear, but from joy. Letters from the curious. People send her messages. Little slips of parchment folded neatly, pushed through the wall. Do you hear God? Do you miss your family? What do you dream of? She reads them all, but never replies. One day, a child sends her a drawing. A house, a tree, a sun with a smile. She presses it to her chest and falls asleep with it there. That night, she dreams she's standing beneath that very tree, and it speaks her name. The vision in the stone. One winter night, the candle won't light. She sits in darkness. Cold seeps into her bones. She wraps herself in a wool blanket and rocks slowly, like a child in a cradle. The walls shimmer, the stones shift. and from them a face forms, not human, not beast, just presence. It looks at her and she understands something without words, that suffering is a door, and she has stepped through it. When the candle finally lights, she weeps again, and this time she is not sure why. The day the world returned, years pass. The village forgets her face, until one day a great storm breaks the steeple. The wall of her cell cracks, and for the first time in over a decade, she feels wind. Children gather, peeking through the broken stone. They see a pale woman wrapped in blankets. Her eyes are closed. Her lips move, but no sound emerges. A priest rushes to her. She opens her eyes and smiles. He asks if she is ready to leave. She says softly, "I never left." They rebuild the wall. She stays. But now people listen more. They send questions again, not about her visions, but about their own lives. Grief, birth, lost love. She writes replies, short ones, gentle. And once, to a child afraid of death, she writes, "There is nothing outside you that you cannot also find within." The quiet trance. Some believe trance means chaos, dance, visions with flashing light. But not all trances burn. Some hush. Some go deeper and deeper into stillness, until thought itself begins to dissolve. Isolde now prays without words. She feels without shape. She becomes slowly the stone itself. And in that silence, she finds music. Next, Mandrake and the roots that screamed. In the next chapter, we leave the cell and return to the earth. We'll dig for the legendary Mandrake root, half plant, half myth. We'll learn why it was gathered with ropes and dogs, and why some swore it screamed when pulled from the soil. Sleep now. Let the silence fill you. And know that even in the stillest place, stories bloom. The earth is dark, rich, and damp. Out here, just before the edge of the forest gives way to cultivated field, lies a hidden patch of soil, a place where strange things grow. The moon is high, the air is still, and a man kneels at the base of a crooked tree, holding a rope in one hand and a prayer in the other. He is here for something precious, something feared, something magical. He is here for the mandrake, the myth beneath the soil. The mandrake is not an ordinary plant. It does not grow like parsley or sage. Its leaves are broad and low, its flowers pale as fog, but it's the root, always the root, that draws whispers. Shaped like a human, twisted arms, knobbed knees, a head with the hint of a mouth. Old stories say it screams when pulled, not metaphorically, truly screams. And if you hear it, you die. So the man prepares carefully. He finds a black dog, young and lean. He ties one end of the rope to the mandrake's stem, the other to the dog's collar. He whispers a blessing or a curse, then scatters meat just out of reach. The dog lunges, the rope tightens, the soil erupts, and the man turns his face away. The silence after the pull. No scream comes, or perhaps it does, but only in the mind. When the dust settles, the root lies on the ground, muddy, twisted, limp. The dog whines, then trots off to find the meat. The man steps forward, trembling. He lifts the mandrake with both hands and feels something old in it, something heavy, like memory, what it was used for. In the medieval world, the mandrake was both medicine and mystery. Midwives used it to ease pain during childbirth. Healers gave it to soldiers to numb wounds before stitching. Lovers used it in potions to ignite desire or bind affection. And some used it for sight, not sight of the eyes, but inward vision, dreams, voices, fragments of other lives. In a manor house north of the woods, a noble woman weeps. She has no children. Her husband grows cold. She hears of a woman who sells the root that breathes life. The noblewoman sends gold. The woman sends back a potion, grated mandrake honey in a sliver of obsidian. She drinks it beneath the full moon and dreams of a child's hand in hers, a boy with her eyes, laughing. She wakes with the scent of lavender in the air, but the cradle remains empty. The witch's gift. In another tale, an old woman is sentenced to hang. She is accused of selling mandrake to the villagers. They say she bewitched a man into madness. They say she flew at night. Before she is taken, she presses a small cloth bundle into her granddaughter's hand. Inside, a dried mandrake root tied with red thread. "It will protect you," she whispers, "as long as you don't ask it to speak." The girl keeps it for 60 years and never once opens the thread. The garden hidden behind the abbey. Some monks were curious. Despite the church's warnings, they planted a mandrake behind the herb garden, called it an experiment, said they wanted to study its effects. They prepared an infusion, Light, barely more than tea. They drank. And for 1 hour, they reported a sensation of floating thought, of time stretching, of light becoming music. They burned the plant the next day, and no one ever mentioned it again. Why the mandrake screams? Was it just a myth? A story to frighten children? Perhaps. Or perhaps the scream is not in the ears, but in the heart. A scream of the soil being disturbed, a soul being pulled from its sleep, a memory torn from the deep dark where dreams go when they die. And if you listen closely, even now, some say you can hear it, when the wind blows just right, when the earth is cold and wet and waiting. The mandrake in dreams. Tonight, a girl sleeps with a mandrake root under her pillow. She doesn't know what it is. It was given to her in a cloth pouch, a keepsake from her great aunt. She dreams of walking in a forest with silver leaves, a path that never ends. A whisper in a voice she doesn't recognize says, "You are part of something older." She wakes with tears and a strange peace. Next, the night dances of the Tarantati. Next, we travel south to a place of heat and rhythm. In the warm lands of Italy, a strange illness sweeps through the people, one only cured by dance. Women leap, spin, collapse, and rise again, all to the sound of drums that never stop. Some call it madness, some call it possession, but for those who danced, it was something else, something freeing. Sleep well, let the root remain undisturbed, and let your dreams take gentle shape. The sun sets slowly over the olive groves. The day has been hot, so hot that even the stones in the square seem to sweat. The air shimmers with heat, and the scent of basil and dust clings to every surface. And from the open windows of a small village in southern Italy, the sound begins. A drum beat, steady, low, then a tambourine, then a voice, high and trembling. And then the dance begins. The bite of the spider. They say it starts with a bite. A spider, small and striped, like hiding in the fields. It slips beneath the skirts of women gathering herbs. It waits in the folds of a linen sheet, hung out to dry. And when it bites, it brings madness. At least, that's what they say. In truth, the bite may be only a symbol, a reason, an excuse, because sometimes the madness already lives inside, and the dance is the only way to let it out. Those who were bitten, or who claimed to be, were called the Tarantati. They would shake, collapse, scream, lose themselves entirely, but only for a while. The cure was music, not soft lullabies, not church bells, but wild pulsing rhythms played by traveling musicians who knew the patterns by heart. A village transformed. Picture the square. The sun has just fallen. The musicians set up in a circle. Their drums echo off the stone walls. In the center, a woman rides. Her body jerks, then leaps. She spins, limbs loose, mouth open, not in joy, not in pain, but something beyond both. People cheer, some cry. One woman kneels beside her, joining in the movement. No one tries to stop them, because this is the healing. What they said the dance could do. It could draw out the venom, it could soothe the mind, it could cast out demons, it could break curses, and yet no priest ever blessed it. No noble sponsored it, because it was folk medicine, a ritual passed from body to body, rhythm to rhythm. Unafraid, unapproved, a bride who danced for days. There was once a young bride named Elisabetta. 3 days after her wedding, she collapsed. No cause, no fever, just trembling hands and vacant eyes. They brought the drummers. They played for hours. She began to move, slowly at first, then frantically. She danced without rest for 3 nights, her gown torn, her hair loose, her feet bleeding. On the 4th morning, she lay still and whispered, "He forgave me." No one ever asked who she meant. The music of the cure. The music was not random. Each rhythm had meaning. One to summon, one to shake, one to sweat, one to sleep. The musicians knew by watching the tilt of the head, the pulse in the neck, the way the dancer's shadow moved on the wall. They followed the signs and led the dancer out. Possession or permission. The church called it hysteria. Men called it foolishness. Doctors called it female disorder. But for the women who danced, it was something else. It was permission to scream, to move, to shake off grief and silence and the weight of being watched. They returned to life exhausted, but clear, lighter, as if something had been pulled out through their skin. The man who couldn't move. Not all who suffered danced. One man, bitten while threshing wheat, refused to rise. He lay for 2 days, eyes open, unmoving. The drummers came. They played until their fingers bled. He did not move, until the music changed. A slower rhythm, a memory of his childhood, a tune his mother used to hum. And then he blinked. His hand twitched. He sat up and he wept. The festival that faded. For hundreds of years, the tarantella was danced every summer. It became part of weddings, of market days, of secret rites. But slowly it faded. Medicine came, so did doubt. People stopped believing in the spider, and without belief, the dance lost its power. But some say the need remains. A girl under the lemon tree. One warm night in a quiet garden, a young girl sits under a lemon tree. She feels something inside her. Not sickness, not sadness, just a pressure, a buzzing. She puts on a recording of an old folk song. She closes her eyes and she begins to sway. Not for anyone, not for a cure, just because her body remembers. Next, dreams brought by incense and smoke. Next, we drift into sacred air. We'll explore how scent shaped visions in medieval churches, shrines, and bedrooms. How frankincense, myrrh, and even opium created dreams, and sometimes opened gates. Not through dancing feet, but through breath. Sleep well, let the music slow. And if your toes twitch in your dreams tonight, perhaps you've been dancing too. The candle is lit, the room is dim, and already the air begins to change. Thin spirals of smoke curl upward, catching the light. They shimmer, then vanish. But they leave something behind. Not just a smell, a presence, frankincense, myrrh, juniper, and something you can't quite name, but feel. This is not fire for warmth. This is sacred fire, burned not to heat the body, but to open the mind. The power of scent. Long before scientists named brain cells, people knew smell is memory. One breath of rosemary could bring a lost lover's face. A whiff of wood smoke might return a forgotten winter morning. But some scents didn't just awaken memory. They awakened visions. The ancients used incense, and in the medieval world, that practice didn't fade. It simply changed shape. The church in the cloud. Step into a cathedral at vespers. The walls rise like cliffs, stained glass flickers. And in the aisles, acolytes swing thuribles, brass censers on long chains. With each swing, a cloud of frankincense unfurls. Golden, thick, holy. The priests chant, the congregation kneels, and the air itself becomes heavier, slower. Breathing it in feels like falling, not downward, but inward. There's a girl near the back. Her hands are folded, her eyes half closed. She's not praying, not exactly, she's dreaming. The smoke wraps around her. She sees light pouring through a keyhole in the sky. She hears music, with no source, and when she blinks, her tears sparkle like glass. She goes home in silence, and that night, she dreams of a voice saying, "You are more than bone." The hidden use of herbs. Not all smoke came from the church. In quiet homes, women burned their own blends. Mugwort to bring vivid dreams. Lavender to calm the spirit. Poppy husk when mourning lasted too long. And sometimes, a pinch of opium resin, smuggled in by a traveling merchant, hidden in linen. These were not prayers, but they were sacred. The grieving mother. In a stone cottage, a mother stares at an empty cradle. Her midwife returns one evening, carrying a small bundle of herbs. She lights them. The room fills with a sharp, bitter smoke. The mother lies back on her cot, eyes open. For a moment, she feels nothing. Then, a hand in hers, small, warm, familiar. A baby's breath against her cheek. She weeps, and for the first time in days, she sleeps. The night before a battle, soldiers camped outside a walled city burn branches of juniper and pine resin. They say it keeps fear away, or spirits, or both. One night, anxious and pale, breathes in deeply. He sees fire, yes, but not on the field. He sees it in the sky, a crown of fire, and a voice calling him by name. He tells no one. But the next morning, he rides first into the breach. Ospium and the apothic dream. In a wealthier household, an apothecary prepares a pipe for the master of the house. He's plagued by migraines, and worse, visions when awake. The mixture is mild, crushed poppy, mullein, a drop of honey. He inhales, and soon, the walls ripple. He sees his dead father sitting by the hearth, smiling. He reaches out, but the figure dissolves like ash. He does not wake for 14 hours. When he does, he is humming a tune no one else knows. In a stone chamber, beneath hanging scrolls and brass tools, an alchemist burns a mixture he discovered in an ancient text. He does not name it, only records what he sees. Smoke like a mirror, time unraveling like thread, a hand reaching from a flame, offering a seed. I refused, I regret it. He seals the page and never breathes that blend again. What smoke opens, smoke can bless, It can curse, it can remind, awaken, erase. In medieval minds, it was not aromatherapy. It was transport from here to somewhere else. Somewhere where the body is forgotten, where the spirit stirs, where dreams walk. A widow keeps a scarf in a cedar box. It belonged to her husband. He wore it the day they met. Every year on their anniversary, she burns a bit of it, just a thread. And for one breath, she is 20 again. He is beside her, and the world is new. Next, the fool and the mad prophet. In the next chapter, we meet those who didn't need herbs or smoke or music, those whose minds were always a little elsewhere, jesters, visionaries, outcasts. In a world where madness and prophecy sometimes wore the same face, we ask, was the fool truly laughing, or did he know more than the king himself? Sleep gently now, let the last of the incense fade, and follow the smoke into sleep. In the great stone hall of a cold northern castle, a jester flips a coin. He sits alone near the hearth, bells on his cap jingling softly as he hums an old melody no one else remembers. The firelight flickers in his eyes far too knowing for someone who makes kings laugh. He is called a fool, but some say he is something else, something more, something older than crowns and candles. The role of the fool, every court had one, the fool, the jester, the clown in motley clothes. He told jokes, he danced, he stumbled and sang and made mockery of all that was sacred. But hidden beneath the bells and paint was often a mind like water, flowing, shifting, deep, and sometimes broken. In a world that punished madness, the fool was allowed to speak the unspeakable, to say what no one dared, to laugh when others cried. The fool named Elias. Elias was born under a red moon. That's what his mother always said. He spoke late, but sang early. He laughed at shadows. He talked to birds. He listened to trees. The villagers feared him, said he was touched, said he should be taken away. But the Lord of the land saw something in him, and so Elias was brought to the castle to wear colors, to perform, to be safely strange. Things he said. He would say things that made no sense, until days, sometimes weeks later, they came true. The wheat will bleed this season. And then the blight came. Beware the man with the golden feather. And then a foreign diplomat betrayed the Lord. The court laughed, called him lucky, called him insane, but no one ever ignored him. The mad prophet in the hills. Far from the court, in a quiet hermitage, lived a man who was once a bishop. Now he wandered barefoot, covered in soot, shouting at clouds and scribbling messages into the dirt. They said he saw visions, angels, demons, whole cities rising and falling in the blink of an eye. He was exiled, yes, but people still came to him to ask what the stars said, what the winds knew, what dreams meant. And sometimes he answered. When madness was sacred, in certain corners of the medieval world there was space, small, fragile space, for those who did not fit. They were not imprisoned, not always. Some were kept close to the court, some sent to live in chapels, some called holy fools, because it was known deep in the bones of belief that the divine sometimes chose strange messengers. The laugh that silenced the hall. One winter's night, during a feast, Elias stood before the court and told a story. It was about a king who laughed while his people starved, who danced while the dead lay in the snow, who was crowned with a fool's hat in the end. Everyone laughed, until the Lord stood and walked out, pale-faced. Elias said nothing, just bowed, and the next spring, the harvest failed. The girl who heard God. In a convent by the sea, a young novice named Clara began speaking in her sleep. The sisters listened. At first, just giggles, then riddles, then words they didn't understand. One night, she recited a passage from a gospel no one had taught her. Another night, she whispered the name of a bishop who died hundreds of miles away, just that morning. The abbess feared possession, but one sister said, "She is laughing at something holy." And Clara smiled in her sleep. The line that blurs, was Elias mad? Was Clara a prophet? Was the old bishop in the hills just broken or blessed? In the medieval world, madness and magic lived side by side, often wearing the same face, and sometimes the most nonsensical words held the most terrible truths. Elias's last joke. One night, Elias placed his cap on the throne. He stood beside it and bowed low. "For the true ruler sits invisible," he said, "and we dance for his dream." They laughed, but the Lord frowned. Elias was sent away. No trial, no sentence, just gone. Some say he wandered into the forest and spoke to wolves. Others say he joined a troupe of traveling players and vanished into myth. But the servants swore for weeks after they heard bells in the halls when no one was there. The fool in us all. Every soul carries a shadow, a corner of wildness, of strangeness, of knowing without knowing why. And sometimes, if the world grows quiet, that fool steps forward. He might laugh, he might cry, he might whisper a truth you've always feared, and then he disappears again, until the next moment of silence. Next, feasts of excess, fevers of the mind. Next, we open the doors to the grand halls again, but this time, not for jesters, for nobles, for long tables, gleaming meats, overflowing goblets, and the strange dreams that came from too much food, or from bread laced with something far stranger than flour, fevers, visions, and what it meant to fall into madness, not by magic, but by indulgence. Sleep well. And if you hear faint laughter in your dreams tonight, listen closely. The table stretches from one end of the hall to the other. Its surface glows with candlelight reflected in bronze platters and silver goblets. Spiced meats glisten. Fruits drip juice onto embroidered cloth. The scent of cinnamon, clove, roasted goose, and stewed cherries hangs heavy in the air. A nobleman raises his goblet. He laughs. His face is flushed. The wine has stained his lips red. And still, the servants bring more. This is not a celebration. Not really. This is escape. The kind sought not in prayer or potion, but in the overwhelming flood of too much, the medieval feast. To the poor, food was life. To the wealthy, food was performance, and the grandest feasts went on for hours, sometimes days, a dozen courses, roast swans gilded in gold leaf, towers of sugar shaped like castles, spiced ale, sweet wine, cherry liquor, poured without end. It was not only about flavor, it was about obliteration, of hunger, of sadness, of thought. What came after? But the body has limits, and after hours of eating and drinking, strange things happened. Fainting spells, fits of laughter, sudden tears, shivers in warm rooms, and dreams so vivid they bled into waking life. Some said it was just too much wine. Others weren't so sure. The young lord and the pig's head. At one winter feast, a young lord named Adrian insisted on eating the eyes of every roast animal brought to the table. He said it gave him vision. By midnight, he stood on the table, claiming he could see into the hearts of his guests. He named their sins, his father's infidelities, his cousin's theft, his own fear of being buried alive. Then he collapsed and would not wake until the third day. He claimed to have seen angels, but they had no faces. The bread that wasn't just bread. In certain regions, rye flour was common, but when stored poorly, it sometimes grew a mold. Ergot. Invisible. Bitter. It poisoned slowly. People who ate ergot-laced bread suffered visions, burning limbs, dancing sickness, a feeling of floating, of skin crawling with invisible worms. Some believed they were being punished. Others believed they had seen something divine. The Village of Fire. One summer, in a village tucked between two rivers, an entire feast ended in horror. They had celebrated a wedding. The bread was fresh, the ale dark and sweet. By midnight, 6 people were convulsing. By dawn, dozens more were screaming about flames licking up their legs. The village priest tried to pray it away. He died before sunset, smiling, they said, claiming he had seen heaven open and a great mouth swallowing the stars. The lady who wouldn't stop eating. In a noble court far to the east, a lady of high birth suffered from melancholy. To lift her spirits, her physician prescribed sweet cakes, sugar plums, and almond milk with rose water. She ate without end. She wept as she ate. And at night, she said her dreams were full of whispers, soft, seductive, demanding. She grew thin despite the food. Her hands trembled, and one morning, she vanished. The kitchen found her nightgown beside the window, and outside, strange footprints in the frost, bare, small, going toward the woods. Fever dreams and fractured minds. Too much heat, too much sugar, too much wine. They said fever made the mind open, and into that opening came visions. A knight once rose from his sickbed during a banquet and claimed he could hear the meat speaking. He wept. He apologized to the roast boar, and then he fainted, clutching a sprig of parsley like a crucifix. He never ate meat again. The feast as escape. For some, it wasn't just indulgence. It was refuge. The world outside was brutal. Plague, war, famine. Inside the hall, with music and roasted pheasant and honeyed pears, they could forget. Even if the forgetting came at a price, of madness, of dreams that didn't fade, of waking up not knowing who you were. The painter at the table. One guest, a quiet man who rarely spoke, attended a midsummer feast. He drank little, ate sparingly, but he watched. The next day, he painted a scene of the table, but not as it had looked. The plates were masks, the guests, skeletons, the wine, rivers of blood. The lord of the manor sat with a crown of fruit and no eyes. When asked why he painted such horror, he said, "It is what I saw." They never invited him again. Next, the saint who floated. Next, we leave the noise and the heat. We enter the quiet glow of a chapel cell, where a woman, soon to be canonized, lies in prayer, and then begins to rise. This chapter is about saints and visions, and whether what we call holiness might simply be another way the mind lets go of the world. Sleep now, let the feast end, and drift into the quiet beyond hunger. The candle is nearly out. Its flame flickers against the stone wall, long and golden, dancing in rhythm with her breath. The chapel is silent, no birds, no footsteps, no chant from the other sisters, just the sound of her, kneeling, unmoving, eyes closed, hands clasped. They say she hasn't eaten in 3 days, hasn't spoken in 2, and that tonight something is coming, not a person, not a sound, but something. Who she was. Her name was Agnes of Leith, born into a poor family, quiet from the start, never quite at home in the world of markets, baking, or gossip. She entered the convent at 16. By 20, she barely spoke. By 22, the sisters said light followed her when she walked. Not bright light, but soft, like moonlight through fog. The fasted often, not from pride or penance, but because she said food made her feel too heavy. "When I am full," she once said, "I cannot hear him." Instead, she drank water with herbs, chewed rose petals, and sometimes simply sat, hands in her lap, eyes closed, as if being alive was nourishment enough. The others watched, with awe and a little fear. The first time she floated, it was during midnight prayers. The chapel was cold. The sisters kneeled on the stone floor, whispering psalms, and then a gasp. Someone had opened their eyes and seen Agnes, still as ever, but lifted, just an inch, maybe 2. Her toes hovered above the floor. Her hair hung loose, unmoved by wind. It lasted only a moment, but when she touched ground again, she wept. "He was so close," she whispered. What the church thought. When word spread, the local bishop came. He brought scribes, physicians, a notary. They watched her pray. They questioned her gently. Was she lying? Was she possessed? Was it real? She answered only, "I asked for nothing," but he came. They left uncertain, but they began to write, and slowly her name became known. The second levitation. It happened as she was praying for a sick child. She placed a hand on the girl's forehead, saying softly, not a hymn, but something older. And then she rose again, this time higher, a full foot. Her veil slipped, her body shone with sweat as if burning from within. The girl gasped, sat up, smiled, and Agnes collapsed. She slept for 2 days. Visions in the dark. Agnes began to see things, not people, not saints with names and halos, but shapes of light. Doors that opened in stone walls, rooms full of gold dust and laughter, voices that said nothing but meant everything. She no longer feared death, nor hunger, nor solitude. She simply waited and watched. Was it madness? Some whispered that she was not holy, but unwell, that hunger and sleeplessness had melted her mind, that she suffered from visions born of lack. But if she was mad, why did people feel peace when near her? Why did animals follow her through the garden? Why did the sick sometimes rise after she touched them? Maybe the truth was more complicated. Maybe sanctity and madness are not enemies, but sisters. The day of her death, she died on a spring morning. The chapel was filled with violets and mist. The bell had not yet rung. A novice found her, kneeling as always, still, smiling, warm. Her hands were folded, her eyes open, looking up, but no one was there. And yet, she looked joyful. What came after? The church eventually canonized her, her name added to calendars, her story copied in delicate script. But the sisters who had known her remembered something else. Not the miracles, not the fame, but the feeling of being near her, like standing in a quiet meadow before a storm, like hearing music just outside the walls, like being gently lifted. The child who watched. Years later, a girl reading about St. Agnes in a dusty chapel closed her eyes and imagined what it would feel like, not to rise into the air, but to rise into yourself, to leave behind the weight of anger, fear, longing, and to float into something soft and holy. That night, the girl dreamed of a path made of stars and someone waiting at the end. Not a saint, just a woman, smiling. Next, the druid's memory still in the trees. Next, we step into a deeper past beyond saints and churches. We return to the groves, where the last whispers of druids still linger in the bark and earth. We'll meet a forest keeper, old and fading, who remembers rites no one dares speak aloud, and the mushrooms, herbs, and songs that once guided the soul beyond this world. Sleep softly. Let yourself drift just an inch above the bed, and feel the stillness of St. Agnes in your breath. The forest is not loud. It speaks in creaks and whispers, in the hush of branches brushing sky, in the rustle of foxes sliding between the undergrowth. But if you stand still, very still, and breathe as if you've never breathed before, you might hear something more. A chant with no words, a silence with intention, a presence behind the bark. For this is old land, and the trees remember. What came before, long before steeples, before bells, before Latin prayers and iron-tipped crosses, there were groves, sacred places of oak, yew, ash, no altars, just circles of stone and root and sky. And among them walked the druids. They spoke to wind. They read signs in the way mushrooms grew. They guided souls not with sermons, but with ritual. The last of his kind, in a hidden glade, a boy finds an old man. The man wears a cloak of wool, patched and faded. He smells of rain and wild garlic. His hair is white moss, his eyes green as lichen. He speaks slowly, like each word must pass through the memory of every tree first. The forest, he says, remembers better than men do. The boy nods and listens. The old writes, the man shows the boy plants, not ones found in books. Fly agaric, the red-capped mushroom with white dots. Yarrow, for wounds of the body. Mugwort, for dreams. Sage, for the dead. He mixes no potions, he offers no cures, only stories. And stories in the oldest way are medicine too. The dream of the grove. One evening, the boy eats a bit of mushroom the old man offers. They sit together under a hawthorn tree. The stars turn slowly overhead, and the boy begins to drift. He sees a great white stag with golden antlers, a stream flowing uphill, a stone circle glowing faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. The wind says his name, but in a voice not heard by ears. The forest keepers lament. The old man does not weep, but his voice trembles when he speaks of time. We forgot the names, he says. We let the smoke steal the sky. We traded visions for walls. He does not hate the priests, nor the churches, but he misses the silence, the way moss grew thicker over sacred stones, the way owls flew lower during ritual, the way people believed. Not magic, memory. What the druids did was never called magic, not by them. It was remembering of where water flowed, of which tree burned brightest in grief, of which herb would open the mind and which would close it again. And more than anything, they remembered how to listen to animals, to dreams, to death. The burial of the belt. When the old man dies, it is quiet. No ceremony, no hymn. The boy, now nearly grown, buries him in the grove. Not deep, the way he asked, wrapped in linen, a belt of herbs at his waist. And around the grave he plants 4 oak saplings, one for north, one for south, one for sky, and one for memory. Years later, the boy becomes a man. He learns letters, he visits towns, he hears new names for old things, but he always returns to the grove, and once a year he eats a small mushroom beneath the hawthorn. He closes his eyes and hears the voice again. You are part of something older. What the trees know. Science will say the trees speak through roots and fungi, a network of signals, chemical whispers, responses to thirst and rot and light. But maybe that's what the druids knew all along, not in numbers, but in feeling. And in that grove, even now, something lingers. Not a ghost, not a god, just a memory that breathes. A young scholar walks into that grove, centuries later. He does not know why, only that he dreamed of it. He sits beneath the hawthorn, pulls out his journal, and writes a name he's never heard before. He looks around and feels, just for a moment, that the moss watches him and approves. Next, potion sellers and love filters. Next, we turn to the world of longing. Not for gods, not for truth, but for love. We'll meet potion sellers in candlelit alleys, lovers desperate enough to drink anything, and the strange highs that come when the heart believes in magic. Sleep now. Let the forest hum in your bones, and remember, some memories were planted so they could grow inside you. She lights a candle, places it in the window, and waits. The flame flickers behind thick glass, casting amber shadows across the shelves. Bottles of all shapes and colors line the walls, some wrapped in silk, some sealed with wax, others hidden in carved boxes. The shop smells of rose, clove, vinegar, and something darker, like iron and longing. And outside on the cobbled street, footsteps approach. He's come for a potion, but not for sickness, for something deeper, something harder to name. Love. The ancient trait of desire. Love filters were not new, they were old as the stars, used by queens and kitchen maids, scholars and stable boys, given in secret, sipped in hope, made not just of herbs, but of desperation and belief, because when the heart aches, it will drink anything. What was inside? There was no single recipe, but many included damiana to warm the blood, honey to sweeten the heart, rose petals for beauty and memory, cinnamon for heat, mandrake root in whispers for boldness, and sometimes a strand of hair or a drop of blood. The potion was rarely dangerous, but it was never harmless. The potion seller. Her name was never written, but she was known, tall, quiet, with eyes the color of stormy sky. People came to her not just for the potion, but for the listening. She never judged. She never rushed. She simply asked, "Do you want to be loved, or do you want someone to love you?" The difference mattered. The girl with the locket. One winter evening, a girl brought a silver locket in a trembling voice. "He doesn't see me," she said, "but I feel him everywhere." The woman made her a small vial, told her to mix it into wine, but not too much. It won't create love, she warned. Only open the heart to its possibility. The girl never returned, but months later, the shopkeeper found a pressed violet and a note. He smiled at me. That was enough. The married man. Not all who came were innocent. One man, wealthy and bored, asked for a potion to make a maid fall in love with him. She gave him something pale and bitter, told him to drink it himself. He did, and for a week he could not stop weeping. He dreamed of her eyes, her laugh, her hands. But when he approached her, she said gently, "I do not love you." And the next day he brought the bottle back. "Thank you," he said. "It made me feel." That was the curse. The dangerous ones. There were those who made stronger filters, with foxglove, which made the heart race too fast, or nightshade, which brought visions mistaken for affection. One woman used crow feathers and menstrual blood. Another used wine soaked with graveyard moss. These potions didn't open love, they opened obsession, and obsession rarely ends kindly. The lovers who tried too hard. A couple once came, already in love, already desperate. "We fear it will fade," they said. "We want to bind it." The seller gave them a charm instead, 2 rings sealed with wax and rosemary. She warned them not to drink anything unnatural. "Let your love breathe," she said. "Even fire needs air." They ignored her. They drank a potion from another vendor, and within a month they could not be apart, even for an hour. They grew afraid, then resentful, then silent, and one day both were gone. No note, no trace. Did they work? It's hard to say. Some claimed love filters worked only when the heart was already open. Others believed they worked precisely because the drinker believed. And sometimes the change wasn't in the other person, but in the one who gave it. To offer love is its own kind of magic, its own surrender, the seller's own secret. She had once loved too. Long ago, a man with dark hair and a laugh like birdsong. She never gave him a potion, never even told him how she felt. He married another, and yet she never grew bitter, because she had once watched him dance in the spring rain, and that memory was enough. Tonight, the girl who enters is barely older than 16. She says little, only looks at the bottles and asks, "Which one is for courage?" The seller smiles, gives her a vial filled only with rose water and a drop of wine. "Drink this," she says, "then speak your heart. Will it make him love me? No, but it will help you love yourself enough." To hear his answer. The girl leaves, and the seller lights another candle, another waiting heart. Next, sleep like the dead, sedatives and strange beds. In our next chapter, we fall into deeper rest. Not the rush of love, but the silence of sleep. We'll explore the medieval ways of chasing dreams, stopping nightmares, and welcoming oblivion. With poppy syrup, prayer beads, and beds lined with herbs, we will finally lay down our heads, sleep well, and dream only of what loves you back. The fire is low. The village has gone quiet. No dogs bark. No wheels creak on the road. Even the wind seems to sleep. And inside a small stone cottage, a woman leans over a bowl of warm milk, stirring in a syrup so dark it looks like ink. She does not taste it. She knows its weight. She knows its silence. It is made from poppy, and it will bring her husband a dreamless night. Or so she hopes. The problem of sleep. Sleep was never guaranteed in the medieval world. There were no blackout curtains, no gentle white noise, no pills with smooth names. There were nights of cold, nights of rats, of pain, of grief. And so sleep became something to be chased, with herbs, with prayers, with whispered spells folded into linen. The herbal arsenal. The common sedatives of the age were simple, but powerful in their own way. Poppy syrup, boiled with honey. Valerian for anxiety. Lettuce water, cooled under the moon. Chamomile for children and the newly widowed. Hops sewn into pillows to keep nightmares away. And always, something soft to wrap around the feet. The bed itself. Medieval beds were not what you imagine. The poor slept on straw, wrapped in wool if they were lucky. The wealthy had feather mattresses, but no real comfort. No one slept fully flat. Most beds were slightly upright, as if the soul might wander more easily if the body were too still. And no one slept without a charm near the headboard. A carved cross, a dried sprig of lavender, or a lock of hair tied with red thread. Nightmares and night visitors. It was not just sleeplessness people feared. It was what might come in the sleep. They told stories of night hags sitting on the chest stealing breath, of incubi and succubi, demons that seduced and drained. One woman said she saw her dead husband every night for a month, standing in the corner, smiling. The priest brought salt. The midwife brought yarrow and rue. Only the midwife's herbs worked. The candle ritual. In some towns, people lit a candle not to see, but to keep the darkness from growing too deep. They'd whisper a name into the flame, the name of someone they missed, someone they feared, or someone they could no longer forgive. Then blow it out, and if the smoke curled clockwise, it meant peace would come. If not, the night might be long. The girl who would not wake. In a monastery guest house, a young woman was given poppy tea for her nerves. She had traveled far. She had not eaten. She wept when she arrived. The monk gave her a small cup. She smiled, thanked him, and went to bed. She did not wake the next morning, or the next. On the third day, she stirred, opened her eyes, and said, "I spoke to someone who smelled like my mother." They never asked her more. The nobleman's bed of iron. One lord, afraid of dreams, had a bed made entirely of iron. No wood, no cloth. He believed spirits could not pass through metal. Each night he lay awake for hours, listening, sweating. Finally, his physician gave him a syrup made of burnt poppy, goose fat, and wine. He slept. But when he woke, he claimed his soul had wandered too far. He never drank it again. Mothers whispered to their babies, "Close your eyes, or the stars will blink out." They sewed sachets of dried mint and marjoram into the corners of the crib, hung bells made of bone at the window to frighten away dreams that didn't belong. And when that didn't work, they sang, over and over, until their own eyes closed too. The gift of a dreamless night. Not everyone feared dreamlessness. For some, the chance to not remember was a gift. To close one's eyes and find only blankness. No memory, no sorrow, no hunger, just a soft descent into nothing. And for many, that was the closest thing to peace, the final bed. In one town, when someone passed, they were said to have gone to their long sleep. Their pillow was stuffed with dried rosemary, their hands tied loosely with a ribbon so they wouldn't wander. People gathered around and whispered, "May your dreams be short, may your sleep be long." And in the end, that was enough. Next, the pilgrim who walked into a dream. Next, we follow a traveler, a boy with worn shoes and a heavy pack, walking toward a holy site. But somewhere along the road, without herbs, without smoke, he begins to dream while awake. He sees the dead, he speaks to saints, and he's not sure anymore which world he belongs to. Sleep now. Let the poppy's breath wrap around you, and may you wake only when your soul has finished wandering. The road is long. It winds between hills and valleys, crossing rivers that whisper and forests that sigh. Dust rises with each step. The air is dry, and the sun is too high in the sky. But the boy keeps walking. His name is Mateo, and he is going to Santiago. His pack is light. His feet ache. He carries a small wooden cross, a water skin, and a letter folded so many times it has softened like silk. But soon, things will begin to change. Not on the road beneath him. but in the world inside his eyes. The journey of faiths were common in the Middle Ages. Paths that stretched hundreds of miles to Rome, to Canterbury, to Santiago de Compostela, where St. James was said to sleep. People walked for penance, for miracles, for answers. Matteo walked for silence. His mother had died the winter before, and no one in the village would speak of it. So he walked. The dust begins to shift. It started on the 12th day. The sun shimmered on the stones ahead, and suddenly there was a figure, standing, smiling, robed in gray. Matteo blinked. The figure was gone. Later that night he dreamed of the same man, sitting beside him, warming bread over a fire. He had no name, but his eyes were the color of the sky just before a storm. Heat, hunger, and the edge of waking. Pilgrims often suffered. Blisters, dehydration, illness. But there was another risk, less spoken of. The slow slipping of the line between dream and day. Matteo stopped feeling hunger. He forgot what day it was. He walked as if in trance. And soon the world began to speak in new ways. Birdsong formed patterns. Tree branches pointed like fingers. Clouds whispered verses he couldn't quite remember. In a quiet village, he stopped to drink from a mossy fountain. An old woman sat nearby. She asked no questions, only handed him a small fig wrapped in a cloth. For remembering, she said. He thanked her, walked away, looked back. She was gone, and the fig had turned to ash in his pocket. The dream on the hill. That night, he slept under an oak tree. The stars were bright, too bright, and in his dream, he climbed a staircase made of feathers. At the top, a door of glass, a man made of wind, and his mother smiling. "You didn't fail me," she said. "You only forgot the end of the story." When he woke, his face was wet, but he felt lighter. Was he losing his mind? Other pilgrims passed him. Some nodded, others avoided his eyes. He spoke little, but when he did, he said things he didn't plan. "There's a chapel beneath this field. That horse used to be a man. Don't drink from the second well." Some laughed, but a few listened. And one night a woman said to him, "You've been walking longer than you think." The church with no name. On the edge of a foggy valley, he found a chapel not marked on any map. Tiny, made of black stone, its windows filled with melted glass. Inside, no priest, no altar, only a single candle still lit. He sat, he slept. And in his dream, the candle said, "You've already arrived." When he woke, it was still burning. By the 23rd day, Matteo no longer knew if he was awake. He met a child with no shadow, spoke to a dog that answered in rhyme, felt the rain fall up instead of down. And somehow, it all felt gentle. Not madness, not danger, just the world softening at the edges, like waking up into something instead of from it. The gates of Santiago. He reached the city. The great spires rose like jagged stars. Pilgrims wept, bells rang, but Matteo didn't weep. He only sat beneath the carved stone arch and felt the road still humming in his bones. He did not enter the cathedral, not at first, because the dream wasn't over yet. The final message. On his last night in the city, Matteo dreamed again. His mother sat in a boat of leaves. The sea around her was ink. She held his hand, looked into his eyes. The journey was not for forgiveness, she said. It was to remember that you are still alive. And then she faded, not with sorrow, but like morning mist. Next, the Templar's secret drink. Next, we enter the world of knights and oaths. In the hidden rites of the Templars, stories of strange brews, mystical visions, and whispers of forbidden knowledge await. What did they drink before battle? What visions did they see beneath the banner of the cross? And what secrets were buried with them? Sleep now, traveler. The road is behind you, and the dream still lingers. The fortress sits heavy on the hill, stone upon stone, like the memory of a sword. Inside its walls, all is quiet, too quiet for a place built by warriors. There are no feast songs, no laughter, only footsteps echoing off the walls and the faint sound of whispered Latin prayers. This is not a monastery, not exactly, and not a barracks either. This is the home of the Knights Templar, sworn to God, trained for war, and some say keepers of strange rites. Rites that involved a cup and what was poured into it. The Templars and of the Order lived by rule, strict, harsh, quiet, no personal property, no softness in dress or word, no women, no gold, no dreams of glory. And yet, they were feared, respected, whispered about, because people believed they had found something deeper than scripture, something older and far more dangerous. The cup before battle. Before certain missions, select knights gathered in a hidden room beneath the chapel. There, lit only by one high window and a few torches, they sat in silence. A bowl was passed, not of gold, not jeweled, wooden, worn smooth by centuries of hands. Inside, a dark drink, bitter, syrupy, made with wine honey and something else. Some said mandrake, others hemp. A few whispered about poppy or crushed petals from a flower that no longer grows. No recipe was ever written, only passed by mouth, and guarded with blood. What the drink? Not all knights were given the cup, only those chosen, only those who had shown a certain readiness. After drinking, they sat still, for hours, and then visions. Some saw fire, some saw the Virgin's face in darkness. One said he saw a lion walking through a library made of air. None of them screamed. None of them broke. The next morning, they rode into battle with no fear, eyes open wider than before, smiling. Was it a sacrament? The church never confirmed such rituals, but neither did it deny them. What is prayer, after all, but the longing for union with something unseen? What is wine at the altar but a mystery swallowed? And perhaps the Templars simply sought a closer path, one that required fire and shadow and the courage to drink what others would not. The accusations. When the Templars fell, they were not just charged with pride or treason. They were accused of heresy, of worshiping a false god, of spitting on the cross, of secret rituals beneath the moon, and of drinking a potion that made them see the devil, or something far stranger. One knight, under torture, confessed to drinking the blood of memory. Another said he saw God walking backward through time. None of them gave a name for the drink, but all swore it was holy. The mystery of Baphomet. The name Baphomet appears in their trial records, a supposed idol, a head with two faces, a being with eyes like stars. Some say it was a lie. Others believe it was a vision born from the drink, a symbol not of evil, but of duality, light and dark, war and peace, heaven and earth. The knights never explained, perhaps because they could not. The last Templar's dream, as he burned, tied to a post in the middle of a Paris square, Jacques de Molay did not scream. He only whispered a prayer, and some say he smiled. A monk watching from the crowd later wrote, his eyes were clear as glass, as if he had already seen the world end and begin again. Perhaps he had. The Grail theories. Centuries later, legends claimed the Templars guarded the Holy Grail. Not a chalice, but a secret. Not gold, but knowledge. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't an object at all. Maybe the Grail was the drink, the ritual, the memory of a vision passed from mouth to mouth, guarded by silence. A Grail you swallowed, not held. The hidden cellar. In southern France, a stone cellar was discovered beneath an old church. Inside, a wooden cup, shards of old glass, and a fresco, barely visible, of men seated in a circle, eyes closed, light blooming from their foreheads. No inscription, no altar, just a single symbol scratched into the wall, a chalice, surrounded by stars, and at its base a root. Next, the burning of the wise ones. Next, we witness the fire, not sacred, but punishing. We return to the women and men who once dared to heal, to fly, to dream, and how the church turned fear into flame, confessions, torture, and the final cries of those who knew too much. Sleep softly tonight, let the chalice pass you by. And remember, not all fire is holy. The square is silent. The crowd gathers at dawn, not out of joy, not even curiosity, but out of fear. Fear of what they do not understand. Fear of the woman standing in the center, barefoot, bound, silent. She has no crown, no sword, no armor, only her name and her knowledge. And now, a pyre. How it began. They once came to her for help. She brewed herbs for aching joints, mended wounds with moss and honey, whispered prayers over fevers, gave mothers herbs to ease birth, gave lovers rose tincture for boldness. They paid her in apples, in bread, in kindness, until one night a child died, and someone needed blame. The church feared what it could not codify, what grew in secret, what women passed down in kitchens, in gardens, in dreams. So when someone flew, even in sleep, or when someone cured without Latin prayers, or when someone said they saw spirits, not saints, they became suspect, not because they were evil, but because they were free. They always confessed. Eventually, under pain, under flame, under the weight of seeing neighbors avert their eyes, they confessed to things they did not do, to flying, to dancing with devils, to using ointments that let them ride the wind. Yes, they said, I flew. But the question was never really about flight. It was about power and who was allowed to have it. He asked about dreams, about roots, about the little jars hidden in the floor. He wanted names. He wanted her to say she kissed the devil. But she only said, I kissed my child goodbye. He wrote it down anyway. The diary under the floorboards. Long after she was gone, someone found her diary, hidden beneath a cracked plank in her hut. It was written in charcoal, on scraps of linen. She wrote of the best time to pick poppies, a dream she had of her dead sister standing in moonlight. A warning, do not mix feverfew with mandrake unless the heart is strong. They fear us not because we fly, but because we remember. A man burned for sight. It was not only women. One man, blind from birth, gained a reputation for predicting storms. He said he smelled the pressure in the air, that bees spoke to him before the rain came. He was called a witch, burned beside two women. The night after his death, the village flooded. The child who watched. A little girl stood behind a wagon watching the flames. She did not cry, but she held her mother's comb in her hand. The woman on the pyre had braided her hair every week, had told her stories of dreams that walked like deer. The girl would grow up silent, until one day, many years later, she would plant a garden, and in it she would whisper all the names that had been lost. What was lost? When the wise ones burned, so did. Recipes with no written form, songs that soothed fevered babies, ways to grieve that didn't involve confession, herbs that only bloomed in certain hands, maps of dreams, and laughter, real laughter, in the kitchen before dawn. The woman at the stake did not scream. She looked to the sky, then to the trees. Then as the fire rose, she said, I go where the smoke goes, and I will return when the soil is ready. They wrote it down as nonsense. But years later, in the same spot, a wild rose bloomed, with petals like embers. Next, the forgotten book of sleep and smoke. Next, we turn the pages of a book that never truly existed, but feels as if it should. A dream manual, passed from hand to hand in secret, full of recipes, visions, warnings, and lullabies. Let us open it together. Let the ink drift like incense, and sleep beside the words. There is a book. It does not sit in any library. No shelf holds its weight. No monk has copied its pages. No scholar has debated its meaning. And yet, it waits, bound in soft leather dark as dusk. Its edges are frayed, its corners bent by many hands. It smells of lavender and ash. And every time you open it, the words are slightly different. This is the book of sleep and smoke, a manuscript born not from ink, but from dreams. On the first page, the ink is pale, faded. You have to tilt the page toward candlelight to read. To the sleeper who remembers, this is for you. Beneath it, a sketch of a poppy bending in wind, and a single instruction, burn a sprig of thyme. Breathe once, begin. You turn the page, and the book X on sleep that heals. Sleep is not silence, it is music made slow. Do not fear the deep hours, that is when the stars speak back. A recipe follows. 3 petals of rose, 2 drops of rainwater from a morning you loved, 1 pinch of crushed cloves, steep in silence. Drink with a lullaby, or with someone's hand in yours. On dreams that teach, a story unfolds, written sideways along the page margins. Once a boy dreamed he became a bird, not to fly, but to fall in love with the sky. The drawing shows a feather and a key. Another note is tucked into a crease. Sleep facing north for wisdom, south for forgetting. Warnings. Not all dreams are kind. The book does not lie about this. If you drink valerian tea under the waning moon, you may see what you fear most. Be ready. It may ask you a question. And later, never sleep in the clothes you wore when you wept. Grief leaves prints in the thread. Rituals for the sleepless. For nights when the mind will not settle, Nash placed 3 seeds of fennel under your tongue. Whisper the name of your first friend. Touch your left ankle 3 times. Count backward from 14. If that fails, speak aloud the story you've never told anyone. Then close your eyes. The dream will carry it for you. The smoke's for sleep. There's a page stained with smudged soot. Burning herbs for dreams. Mugwort to invite dreams. Chamomile to soften them. Birch bark for clarity. Applewood for memory. A side note scribbled in smaller hand. If the smoke curls towards you, the dream will visit. If it curls away, it waits another night. Lullabies with no notes. The book includes songs, but no music, only words. Soft, circular, repetitive. One is titled simply For a Stranger's Child. Sleep, small branch, sleep like stone. Dust is dancing, wind has grown. Stars are sweeping, hearth is bare. Lay your breath in quiet air. It's hard to tell if it's meant to soothe a child or the child still living inside you. The invisible page halfway through, one page appears blank. But when breathed upon, faint letters emerge. There is no herb stronger than forgiveness. No explanation, just that. The next page begins with a sketch of an open palm. A map made of sleep. Toward the end, there is a map, drawn in dream logic. Landmarks include the field of forgotten names, the bridge of things almost said, the shore where the stars fell in, the forest of rooms you look at it too long, and your chest tightens. You turn the page. A final entry. There is a note written near the back in a hurried hand. If you are reading this, the world has grown too loud again. Come back to the quiet. Remember, sleep is not escape. It is return. Below it, in different ink, leave this book beneath your pillow. It will find the next reader. And finally, the last line. Good night, dreamer. You are already halfway home. Next, good night, my little monk. Next, we reach the end. A farewell, a reflection. A soft winding down of all the lives, all the visions, all the highs and hushes we've passed through. It is a bedtime story, a goodbye from the world that was, and a hand placed gently on the shoulder as you fall asleep. Sleep now. Let the smoke rise. And if a dream taps on your window, let it in. You've made it to the end. Or maybe the beginning of a very good sleep. This is the last page of our journey, a whisper to close the story. Not with answers, but with calm. Not with noise, but with a long, slow exhale. Let's take one final step together. Not into war or ritual or potion or dream, but into stillness, a little monk sleeping. In a tiny chapel far from any road, a boy wraps himself in wool. His head rests on his arms, his breath is deep. He is not praying. He is not speaking in tongues. He is simply sleeping. And the other monks watch him with love and something close to awe. Because in sleep, the boy is more peaceful than the world has ever been. The journey we took, we've walked through so many places. A herbalist's cottage full of jars and whispers, a tavern where ale turned to vision, a monastery where mushrooms grew under the floor, a dance beneath a hot Italian moon, a mandrake root pulled from the soil like a scream, a saint who floated, a fool who knew too much, a girl who brewed love in a bottle, a book that wrote itself from the edge of dreams. We've seen visions, madness, healing, and longing, and we've seen sleep. As silence, as refuge, as a kind of flight. Was it all real? That's the question, isn't it? Were the ointments real? Did the monks truly rise into the air? Did the Templars see other worlds in a cup? Did the girl really dream of a field made of stars? Maybe not. Or maybe that doesn't matter. Because even now, if you sit very still, you might feel a soft breeze from a place that isn't here. A memory you've never lived. A name you've never heard, but miss all the same. And maybe that's the answer. What the past left us. Not spells, not power, not truth carved in stone, but something smaller, gentler, more human. A recipe passed from hand to hand. A whispered lullaby. A feather kept under a pillow. A prayer not to be safe, but to be seen. You are the dreamer now. Everything you heard, everything we explored, came from lives just like yours. People who hurt, who hoped, who reached for something just beyond the veil of their world. Who asked, is there more? And even if they found no answers, they found the right questions. And now so have you. The candle is almost out. As you lie there, eyes heavy, breath slowing, I want to remind you, you don't need a potion. You don't need a saint's blessing. You don't need incense or ritual or forbidden plants. You just need rest. Because rest is magic, a spell your body knows by heart, a ritual you've practiced since before you could speak. A place where the world softens and you return to yourself. And if you dream, may your dream be kind. May it take you to a garden with herbs that hum, to a chapel where a candle never flickers, to a forest where names are spoken by leaves, to a bed where love waits without asking anything in return, to a sky that sings, to a silence that holds you like a lullaby. Good night, my little monk. That's what I call you now. Not because you believe, but because you listened, because you sat in stillness with me, because you wandered through 20 chapters of mystery and emotion and human wonder, and now you're ready to sleep. So I'll say it softly one last time. Good night, my little monk. The world can wait, the stories can rest, the dream is yours now. Sleep well.